introduce our chief guest, a man whom I see as brilliant. I don't have any other words to describe him. A man with a golden heart, a man who's brilliant, and I believe will be the greatest legal luminary that this country ever sees, and probably the world sees as well, because that's what his potential is and that's what he can really do. I'd like to call upon Sai Deepak to come and say a few words right now. Sai.
Thank you, Frank, for the warm introduction and the generous praise that you've heaped on me. I really don't know how to react to it. I should first of all congratulate Frank on his wonderful initiative, Bharata Fest, because very few people have the guts to give up the comfort of their jobs and take the plunge necessary to pursue their passions. And Frank, as a family man, has taken the plunge. And according to me, that takes a lot of guts. And it goes without saying that this wouldn't have been possible without the support of his family. And I'm fortunate to know them as friends. And I congratulate the entire team of Bharata First for having seen the first month through. I'm sure there would have been a lot of teething troubles, but according to me, this is just the beginning, and you're going to go places, because I think the idea of Bharat, I won't use the word India, the idea of Bharat has finally arrived. And hopefully in the times to come, we will see more such initiatives. And I see Bharata First as actually trailing the blaze here and treading the untread path. And given that the digital medium is the medium of the future, not just the present, I think a fantastic, let's say, chart is being busted here for all practical purposes. Two, I went through the newsletter, and it warms my heart to actually read some of the pieces written in the newsletter, because there used to be a time when, as a school-going student, I was used to seeing such pieces in the Hindu's Saturday edition called The Young World, I think. That was the name. And with the years, I think the tone and tenor of even The Young World has changed. And I'm no more a fan as I used to be then. And hopefully, Bharata First will at least rekindle those nostalgic memories. And I will get to read, let's say, views which resonate with the beating pulse of this land and this civilization. So my congratulations to Frank and his entire team for having seen through this first month. And I'm absolutely sure that in the coming days and years, we will see a lot more traction for the kind of work that they do. And I always believe that any kind of initiative requires an investment in the future, and that would mean in the young generation, because the present is on its way out, the past is over. So anybody who's interested really in making a change in any direction, in any realm, on any front, must necessarily invest in the next generation. And Bharata First, according to me, is fantastically positioned to capture that particular audience. I will do whatever I can to support this particular initiative through the limited presence that I have on social media and other places. And I will make sure that the people, at least in my circles, read the content that is, read and consume the content that is put out by Bharata First. May I have a few more minutes, Frank? Can I just take 2 minutes?
The floor is yours, Sai. We don't have any time limitations. We don't. The entire country is waiting to listen to you. There are over 200 people watching us live right now, just waiting to see what we have to say and what you have to say. So please, the floor is yours. You can take as much time as you want.
So I'll bust a few myths, because after Bharata First was set up, Frank has called me on more than one occasion to participate in a couple of debates. And my unavailability has given rise to certain rumors that perhaps there is some kind of a friction going on between Frank and me. The fact is that apart from my practice-related commitments, I'm just in the course of finishing my book. And by the end of this week, it should be done.
Since we are here, Sai, why don't you say something about your book as well? I mean, I'm sure many people will want to know about it. I know you've spoken to very few about it. I'm one of those. So why since you're almost done with it, why don't you just give us a little bit of a trailer?
So it is more or less the sum and substance of everything that I've spoken about and written about since 2016. And that particular year is significant, since that's the year I went independent to set up practice as an arguing counsel, which gave me more freedom to express my views on issues of national importance. And not that it makes any difference to the country or anybody else, because I don't wish to overestimate what I'm capable of doing. I just know for a fact that I had certain views which I wanted to share with the society at large. And over the last 4.5 to 5 years, I've had the opportunity to meet brilliant people, including Frank, people who are better informed than me in subjects such as civilization and constitution and whatnot. And I wanted to make sense of this book through a different prism altogether, this document called the Constitution through a different prism altogether. Therefore, the idea was to try and understand the Constitution from the perspective of someone who's interested in protecting Indic civilizational values. If I subscribe to a worldview and I believe that Bharata is not just a geography, but it is also an idea, then what is the respect that that particular idea is accorded to the Constitution? And what is the place that this idea gives to the Constitution? In the sense, what is the relationship between Bharata and the Samvidhan, so to speak? And therefore, I started speaking about it, I started writing about it. I was pushed in a certain direction by two brilliant scholars, Dr. Indu Vishwanathan, who is a scholar from the United States, who writes extensively on teaching and pedagogy, so on and so forth, and is someone who I believe is an emerging voice, or perhaps is already an established voice in the realm of understanding coloniality, which is to say, countries after they have become independent post decolonization, what is it that they must do to regain their identity and to regain their control over their own identity, which is to say, who are we, where do we come from? Is it something that we should write about ourselves, or should we let an outsider write about us? These are certain questions. And when I started reading that particular literature, which she was kind enough to share with me with specific inputs, and another scholar, Ms. Sumita Ambasta, who's based out of Singapore, but who's worked extensively in the field of education in Bharat, she asked me to start reading up on the language policy and so on and so forth, saying, why is it that India's constitution is not interpreted in an Indian language? Why is it that it's not understood in an Indian language? These are issues that she pushed me into asking. And gradually, as I started reading up and writing on these subjects, I think around September last year, I finally mustered the guts to start writing a book, because more than anything else, it requires a certain degree of mental stamina and patience and perseverance to see it through. Because I don't think the beginning counts for too much unless and until you're able to see through a certain initiative. That is the most important thing, to be able to see it through and to last till the entire project is over. And touched wood, by God's grace, I can confidently say that these 6 months have been perhaps the most trying 6 months of my life, with a lot of, let's say, upheavals on the personal front because of my parents' health and all that, and practice and everything else. But with the grace of the gods, and gods being in plural, I've been able to see this through. I think it runs into about 140,000 words, and that would effectively translate to about 500 to 520 pages. And I had the support of my research team from Indic Collective, specifically Ms. Shaktiki Sharma, who was instrumental in giving me some of the best literature that I couldn't have laid my hands on independently. And that gave me a whole new perspective. The idea that I am trying to present through the book is very, very simple, and perhaps it resonates with the motto or vision of Bharata first, which is that there is no point in Bharata wanting to be a Vishwaguru if it is not a guru to itself, and which means it must first learn from its own past and must draw from its own history the principles and the values that it wishes to live by. There is no point in spouting gyan to the rest of the world on what is the way forward for the mukti or the liberation of the world, unless and until you know the way of your own liberation, so to speak. Okay, so the idea is to try and let's say give this particular generation sufficient reasons to be proud of this land and see the land for what it is, what's and all, without necessarily glorifying every aspect. To understand that this land is less about, pardon me for being politically incorrect, but that's my nature. This land is less about equality. This land is less about peace. And these are things that we keep saying about this land. This land is about truth and knowledge, whatever the consequence. So the idea is to be able to speak the truth and to pursue knowledge. And therefore, if you have to embrace certain uncomfortable aspects But if those uncomfortable aspects are rooted in truth and knowledge, then anyone who is a descendant of the civilization and sees himself as a descendant of the civilization in letter and spirit must necessarily embrace the truth, regardless of how bitter it may be and regardless of how uncomfortable it may make you. So the ability to break preconceived notions which may be in your head and to look at things for what they are is the attempt that this book makes. And hopefully, those people whose hearts beat for Bharata, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what their affiliations may be, should be able to understand this particular position independent of any preconceived notions. So I have tried to refer to some international literature, then I've tried to refer to national literature, and I've tried to explain how both of them meet, what is the kind of handshake that we see. Although as a lawyer, sometimes your writing style becomes extremely rigid and you're used to drafting more than writing, there being a huge difference between the two. I've tried to keep the language as simple as possible so that the target audience between the age groups of 18 to 30 are able to relate to this particular book. And as opposed to peppering this book with my opinions, I've tried to present first-hand literature so that they can read for themselves if I am interpreting something based on my preconceived notions and biases, or is the literature supporting what I already believe. So I've tried to give them as much content as possible. And what started off as one book has now been broken up into a trilogy of sorts. The first book effectively covers the period, broadly speaking, from the 7th century until 1919. The second book covers the period from 1919 to 1952, which I will start writing 2 or 3 months later because I need a break after this book is out. And the third book will tentatively cover the period between 1952 and 1977. The idea is to show how the first 30 years of the independent Republic of India are so monumental and are so important in understanding the journey of this document that we call the Constitution and its relationship with civilization, with Bharatiya civilization or the Indic civilization, so to speak. And therefore, I hope that this book, whether it ultimately gives people certain conclusions or not, it at least gives them enough material to start asking the right questions. My belief is that even if you don't arrive at the right answer, if one generation starts asking the right question, some generation will at least arrive at the right answer. Okay. So the direction that you take and the intention with which you start a certain project, according to me, make the entire difference. That's the world of difference. What resources are at your disposal and what kind of opulence you're blessed with, these are not in your hands. These are ultimately matters of fate, luck, and destiny. So the simple analogy is that in a game of cards, let's assume for a moment that you're one of the players. What kind of cards are dealt to you are never in your hands. It's never in your hands. But what you do with those cards and how best you're able to use the circumstances to your advantage is effectively what decides your innate worth. So the cards that land on your table perhaps are, let's say, a reflection of destiny, so to speak. But what you do with those cards is effectively the consequence of your karma and your own viveka, which is wisdom. So that is basically how we function, and that's how we believe is the relationship between destiny and free will of an individual. The idea is through this book, people will have more confidence in their identity as Bharatiyas, and when they decide to hold their own before an international audience, they will have all the ammunition that they need to defend this land without any degree of defensiveness and without any degree of self-doubt or self-loathing. That is more or less what I've tried to do through this book. And I believe that it is in sync with the entire purpose of the setting up of Bharata First. And once the book is out, I hope to have an opportunity to discuss this book at length and perhaps certain critical portions at length, so that I'm able to explain its practical consequences in our day-to-day conversations about the Constitution, about politics, about identity politics, about caste politics and whatnot. So I've touched upon all these aspects.
All issues that we've discussed in the past as well, and that I would be glad to take up with you at another time after reading the book, to try and pinpoint and try and see and find some loopholes, like we always do in our discussions. I'm sure the book will be a super hit, Sai, because, there have been several chat messages that have come through, as we were speaking on YouTube Live as well, who have been saying that, they're going to go out and buy the book on the first day itself, and they're going to line up at bookstores and buy the book. So I'm sure it's going to be a great hit. And, the idea of the book is a fantastic idea. That's something, there's so much of commonality, like you spoke about as well with Bharata First, because that's something that I've been propagating, something that I've been talking about from day one. We are descendants of great kings, of great wise men, of rishis, of knowledge that we've seen thousands of years ago that the world has never seen today. That is the kind of lineage that we have. Those are our ancestors. Imagine if we can mix that with modern knowledge and modern sciences, what we can achieve. We will truly be unbeatable. And this is what the world is worried about and scared about. And that's why trying to put India behind. The Britishers and the Mughals realized that when they came to India, and that's why they decided to destroy our universities and our scriptures and our texts first. And we are still bearing the brunt of it. But one day, I'm sure, we'll rise like the phoenix. And that's why I say we will make Bharata great again. And that is the motto of Bharata First as well. So wishing you the very best as far as your book is concerned, Sai, and I'm sure that it will be a super duper hit. Sorry, I cut you short while you were talking about why, you have not been appearing on Bharata First after that one time. Please go ahead.
So I hope that in the future, as and when, in fact, after the 24th of April, I expect to be free. I hope to join a lot many more discussions. And Frank knows this, and I say this as a public confession, that I don't enjoy going to high-powered conferences or speaking circuits because I practically don't see the utility behind it. Whenever I get an opportunity to interact with a young audience, nothing stimulates me more than that. And I believe that this particular medium will give me an opportunity to tap into that particular audience as much as possible. And hopefully we are able to touch upon sensitive discussions which typically make us squirm in our seats because of the language that is employed or the nature of the discussions or the nature of identities that are involved. Is it possible for us to have sane, civil discussions and calm discussions on the very same issues based on facts as opposed to throwing rhetoric around, so that we are able to understand and appreciate things more from the standpoint of, let's say, logic and reason, as opposed to, let's say, rhetoric or some kind of identity-based complexes being inserted into the discussion. Okay, so that's one thing. And three, I believe that quite a few law students are involved in Bharata First's initiative. I was contacted by one particular person from, I think, HNLU, I think Raipur.
Correct. And yes, and he's one of the youngest members of the team as well.
Fantastic. And I
don't know how much of it you heard because you got disconnected in between, Sai. He called me day before yesterday and he said, "Sir, Bharata First के साथ ही काम करना है जिंदगी भर."
अरे वाह, fantastic.
So that is the kind of commitment, and this is not something that I forced down them or forced down their throat or anything like that. That is the kind of commitment they have for Bharata. And that's what I thought I'll convey to you and to everyone else as well. So that is what his name is Anand.
Oh, so he called me, and I should commend him for the patience with which he constantly reached out to me, because I wasn't able to respond to his calls before because of the busy schedule of the last 3 or 4 days. And his enthusiasm in being a part of this particular initiative spoke volumes of two things. One, that he clearly believes in the vision of Bharata First, and two, he obviously has a lot of respect for you, Frank. So I think it bodes well, and I think these kids have managed to find the right person to be associated with and the right initiative to be associated with. And with time, I hope that this particular initiative also manages to reach institutions such as JNU and TISS Mumbai. And I hope that those institutions, which are now seen as being outside the Indic worldview or the civilizational worldview, ultimately convince themselves that this is the right way to be and this is the way of the future. And I hope they find both an incentive as well as an inspiration in being part of this initiative in the future. And the day you have, let's say, followers from both these campuses, I will make sure that there is a special event of sorts where we celebrate this, because according to me, these institutions, for all practical purposes, are the litmus test for a very different reason. Kudos to your team. Kudos to everyone who's part of this. I'm not sure if I can take questions at this point, but I can guarantee you that this is not the end. This is the beginning of my association with Bharata First, and I'll be there in many future discussions.
I have a couple of questions for you. We are not going to open this up for questions, of course, because then we'll have to sit here for the whole night, and that's something that I don't want to do. We'll keep that for another day because you two are busy at the moment. So, a lot of people have also commented and said how the both of us are seen only on serious platforms and we only talk seriously. Let's try and address that as well, and let's try and address another myth and try and bust another myth. लोग बोलते हैं कि हम लोगों को हिंदी पता नहीं है, चलिए हिंदी में बात करते हैं साई, है ना? हिंदी में बात करते हैं क्योंकि हम तो हिंदी जानते हैं, हम हिंदी पढ़ते हैं, हिंदी में शोज भी किए हैं हम दोनों ने। तो चलिए बात करते हैं इंडिया के विजन के बारे में, भारत की दृष्टि के बारे में। आपका क्या सोच है भारत के बारे में और भारत की युवा के बारे में, और किस तरीके से आगे ले जाना है?
तो सबसे पहली बात ये है कि मैं हैदराबाद से हूं, तो मेरी हिंदी और उर्दू दोनों ही दुरुस्त हैं। दूसरा, मैं दिल्ली में 12 साल रह चुका हूं, और कहते हैं कि अगर आप किसी देश में या किसी नगर में 7 साल के लिए रहते हैं तो आप उसी नगर के बन जाते हैं। सो इफ समबडी वर टू आस्क मी माय आइडेंटिटी, आई वुड से आई एम अ Hyderabadi Tamilian who has become, for all practical purposes, a Noida Vasi. So I am an Uttar Pradeshi in that sense. So my Hindi is fairly good. The only thing is, जितने भी लोग दिल्ली में बात करते हैं उनकी हिंदी नहीं है, वो छिंदी होती है, बिकॉज ये हिंदुस्तानी होती है, बिकॉज देर आर नो वर्ड्स लाइक करा एंड करी इन हिंदी. किया एंड किया नहीं, these are the words, but unfortunately they speak this language, whereas my Hindi is relatively more chaste and shuddh. For all, when it comes from the school, I've learned it and I'm very, very comfortable with the language. Most people don't know that मुझे हिंदी बहुत ही अच्छी लगती है, एंड मैं हिंदी के जितने भी लिटरेचर होते हैं, साहित्य होते हैं, मैं उसको पढ़ता रहता हूँ, नॉट टू स्ट्रेंथन माय हिंदी, बट भारतीय भाषाओं में से ऐसे एक तो भाषा होनी चाहिए जिसमें आपकी जो प्रोफिशिएंसी है उतनी होनी चाहिए जितनी कि आप इंग्लिश में बोलते हैं, बिकॉज आई थिंक इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ शेम if an Indian is more comfortable in English than in Indian languages, and I am one of those people, unfortunately. I don't take pride in the fact that I speak English better than any other language. In fact, one of the biggest regrets of my life is that I don't even know how to read Tamil. While I know how to read Telugu and I love Telugu as a language, I don't know Tamil. So दिल्ली में आने के बाद मैंने इतना तो डिसाइड कर लिया था that हिंदी लिटरेचर को जितना हो सके मैं उसको पढ़ने की कोशिश करूंगा. And two, most people don't know, जब मैंने अपने करियर की शुरुआत की थी दिल्ली में, तब मैंने डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट्स में भी आर्ग्यू किया था, और डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट में ज्यादातर एक मिश्रित भाषा का उपयोग होता है, और अगर आप वहां पे जाके अंग्रेजी झाड़ते हैं तो आपको कोई भाव नहीं देता है. ओके, तो आपको किसी भी हालत में हिंदी सीखने की जरूरत पड़ती है. सो माय हिंदी इज फेयरली गुड. 3, I think the test of how good you are in a language is when you're angry, what is the language you switch to? And whenever I need to get sarcastic or angry, I think Hindi is the first thing that comes to my tongue. So I think if there is any proof of familiarity needed with a certain language, well, there you have it. 3, I've often been told that in most of our shows, whether it's with you or anywhere else, I'm not seen smiling or laughing. It just so happens that how do I put it? I'm perhaps more focused on delivering the message or the content through in the short time that we have. But on the stage, whenever I get on the stage, जब भी मैं live audience के सामने बात करता हूँ, तो व्यंग के बाण तो बहुत ही निकल जाते हैं मेरे मुंह से, और टिप्पणी में बहुत अच्छी तरह से कर देता हूँ. And there is always a smile that is waiting to come out, because most people don't know that I was not a studious first bencher. I was a typical last bencher. I'm in the same distinguished company as Steve Jobs. The only thing is he dropped out. I didn't drop out. Fortunately, unfortunately, that's for God to decide later. So, in fact, to bust a myth, a lot of people know that the kind of ribald jokes that are typically associated with Delhi humor, I am the fount of all those jokes when I'm in private. So as far as I am concerned, I don't see myself a serious person. But when the subject demands a bit of seriousness, I end up becoming serious. And Rajya Sabha TV में तो जितने भी discussions Frank उठाते हैं, fortunately we have at least some journalists like Frank who take their profession so seriously and who stick to their professional ethics, and वो बात को बिना मिर्ची मसाला डाल के उसको प्रेजेंट करने की कोशिश करते हैं. So which is why जब Frank कोई सवाल करते हैं, then I do my very best to do justice to that particular thing, because I've been on prime time channels and I've been on Rajya Sabha TV. especially on Big Picture with Frank. And there has not been a single channel or a single experience that comes anywhere close to the freedom that I have to put forth my point of view. And I can say this of any guest, because I don't think Frank is partial to any of his guests. Every guest who comes to his platform feels that he has the freedom to put forth his point of view, whether or not it agrees with Frank's point of view. And I've never seen Frank impose his point of view as a moderator or as a guest or as a host of a certain discussion. So considering all this, maybe once we go regularly on Bharata first, rest assured, I'll show my mischievous side also.
चलिए, अभी के लिए तो दो सावले मद्रासियों ने दिखा दिया भारत को कि हिंदी जानते हैं हम लोग और हिंदी में भी बात कर सकते हैं। और उम्मीद है कि ये भी सुधार आएगा कि सदर्न रीजन में जो कोई भी है मद्रासी नहीं है, ये जानेंगे नॉर्थ वाले भी, है ना? So chaliye, let's talk about another aspect, Sai, because, since we are keeping it light, we'll try and wrap it up in the next 5 minutes. A couple of aspects, we'll talk about what is your favorite food? Because, strangely, we know each other for so long. We know we've had so many meals together, but somehow we have not come down to discussing favorite food,
So I've realized, and based on the limited travels that I've had outside India, that I'm at heart an Indian when it comes to food, and as long as it's vegetarian and it's Indian, I can eat anything under the sun. Okay. And I wish I could say that I have a continental taste or an Italian taste or a Chinese taste. Not at all. My palate is 100% Indian, and the cuisine that I fall for is 100% Indian. I love thalis, whether it's the Rajasthani thali or the Maharashtrian thali or the Gujarati thali. और sometimes ये प्राणी जो है आंध्रा भवन में पाया जा सकता है, licking his fingers and smacking his lips, along with the Westerners who sit there without the spoon or the fork. Or you can sometimes find me in Bukhara also, eating away to glory. So Indian food, any kind of, from whichever region it is something I'm a great fan of. I enjoy, let's say, the litti chokha from Bihar as much as I have the paniyaram of the south. And I enjoy the paratha of Punjab as much as I enjoy the Malabar paratha, okay, or what we call brota in Tamil Nadu. So I'm a huge fan of all this. And I think the breakfast of Bangalore is unbeatable with the kesari bhat and whatnot. In fact, when I used to intern in 2008 in John F. L's Technology Center in Bangalore, I'm someone who's almost usually the latecomer. If somebody is behind me, then they are the latest. Okay, nobody can come later than me. And I used to reach this campus early only to have the breakfast during my internships. So I'm a foodie out and out. The lockdown has given me an opportunity to lose my weight, but it's not something that I'm very proud of because I miss food. So that's where it is.
But since we are here, Sai, you must tell me. So no wonder we've not zeroed in on one single particular dish and one cuisine, because because of this precise reason. Right. You're one of those very few 30-plus-year-olds who I've seen who's eating so much and who's managed to lose weight after 30. Tell me, what is the secret?
No, so for this, the diet, according to me, this keto diet and all that really doesn't work for me.
Does it work really? Keto diet? You're the last person whom I think would do this keto diet.
I can't do that keto diet and I can't survive on paneer and all that. So what I've tried to do is what I would call, for the lack of a better word, perhaps the Hindu diet, which is Ekadashi is something that I take seriously every month. And that effectively translates to 36 hours of fasting for each Ekadashi. So that's about 3 days a month, hardcore fasting. And of course, I don't do Nirjala fasting, which means I have to keep drinking water. So twice a month, that is the case. And at least once a week, I fast. And once a week, there is, let's say, a fruit-based diet. And I try not to eat post sunset, which has been our rule. In fact, surprisingly, I learned from a Jain friend that even they don't believe in eating post sunset because they're afraid of insect or anything else being consumed as part of their food. So that's why they don't have it as well. Other than that, until 2011-12, I was in peak shape. In fact, between 2013 and 2018 is when I put on massive amounts of weight. I think in January 2019, I was 109 kilos. And in March 2020, when the lockdown began, I was 102 kilos. I came down to about 83.6 in August in a span of about 6 months. And it does not require any kind of magic. It does not require any kind of, let's say, rigorous regimen, so to speak. You just need discipline. And now I hover anywhere between 87 and 88. So I think age is just a number. As long as you have the discipline and the willpower to say no to food, at least at the wrong time, I think you're more or less there. Maintaining your weight is not at all the issue. Weight loss and fitness are two different things. I'm beginning to realize that. So hopefully we are not entering another phase of lockdown. I just hope that's not the case, because it'll affect so many people's livelihoods. But if at all that happens, then I will focus on my weight even more, because now that the book is done, I hope to at least practice to become a marathon runner, so to speak. So let's see what happens.
Sai Deepak, a dear friend, first now, a guest first on my show, turned into a friend, and now our families also are really, really close, and we are family friends. And I'm really proud to know a man like Sai Deepak, and to have a friendship that is so strong with this gentleman whom I consider to be one of the greatest minds that we presently have. I know he's modest and he will never accept it. He never has accepted it as well whenever we had this conversation. But I keep reminding him every time we meet, and every time he just keeps dismissing it. Let me also fill you in on a little bit of detail. Sai Deepak, for all the noise, for all the knowledge, for all the volume and the pitch that he speaks with online, is one of the most introverted people that I know. He barely says a word, and he barely speaks above his breath. You really have to poke him, and it's like poking the bear. Then finally, when you agitate him, is when he speaks, or when you engage him in a truly meaningful conversation, is when he speaks. Otherwise, he's one of the biggest introverts that I know. Sai, one secret out now for the world.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule and being here. Really, really appreciate it. Wouldn't have had it any other way. I couldn't have thought of a better person to do this for me. Really, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to thank all of you who have been here and who are part of this as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for thank you for spreading the word as far as Bharata First is concerned. I'd like to wrap this this session right now. Thank you. Continue to spread the word. Continue to spread the love. This is not my platform. This is Bharata's platform. So kindly spread the word. That's it from me. Namaskar. See you again next time.
I almost expected you to say thank you for wrapping up this edition of The Big Picture.
Strangely, after doing that for 8 whole years, I've never made that mistake even once for the last 1 month. Okay. So Bharata is doing it for me. It's not me. It's Bharatma who's doing it for me. Right. So yeah, so it's strange. It's real. Thank you for bringing that up as well, Sai. Pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.